way. You just have to look to see when it's there every once in a while on the plans to see if anyone is waiting. Sometimes people come in.
How does one let them in?
It says here, and it'll say, you just press the, I'll come around, look also. Okay. And we thank Rabbi Rosenblatt for joining us today, giving the shiur, and we're going to start.
Good morning, everyone, and friends at home as well. Thank you so much, Mendy, for your invitation. I apologize. I'm a little bit under the weather, and I am quite sure that the quality of the shiur will reflect exactly that. So one saw a sign in Israel that said, "Doctor cures sick diseases." This was before everyone in Israel knew English. So I guess if diseases can get sick, shiurim can get sick too. So could happen. I thought it would be worthwhile to spend a few minutes exploring the Haftarah, which will be read this coming Shabbos, following Parshas Achrei Mos Kedoshim. There are discussions in halacha and different minhagim as to exactly which Haftarah is read, but our custom is to read from the final verses of the book of Amos. Amos is one of the 12 smaller prophets, and he prophesied in the northern kingdom. Had Amos operated in a later time, he might well have been a satirical cartoonist because his imagery is extremely sharp, and he is inveighing at a particularly trying time for prophets. Why? Because when things are going well and when a society is prosperous, people do not have much interest in listening to corrective messages. They pretty much assume that things will go on as they are forever and ever. Well, he is a prophet who is in a corrupt kingdom under corrupt kings who have realized that it is much easier to control an idolatrous people than to control a people which is living under the rule, not only under the rule of the Almighty.
No, this is just the mute. You hear this here, there.
My mute's muted. Okay, we're good. I think everybody's muted. It's muted already.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. It is much easier to control people when you are living under an idolatrous regime. Idolatry is by its very nature corrupt, by its very nature about placating interests and offering bribes, so to speak. The whole of idolatry is one big bribe, rather than have to live under the Torah, which represents a double challenge to corruption. Number one, the Ribbono Shel Olam is watching everything, and the idea of a judge who cannot be bribed, the definition of incorruptibility, that is who Hashem is. He is Hashem Emes, B'Soroso Emes. He is by definition incorruptible. Furthermore, the fact that his majesty is expressed through obedience to the word of the Torah means that the law is a publicly owned commodity, a publicly traded stock. Everyone has access to the Torah. And as a result, because one has access to the law, one has access to justice, because one can point out where behavior is deviant. And so a monarchy bent upon corruption can do itself no more fundamental favor than to try to move the people away both from the Ribbono Shel Olam and from his Torah. At that point, everything becomes a chaos of interests and bribes and language which has been disconnected from any real meaning and just plays in the air, so to speak. So the prophet Amos was living in exactly that kind of time. He speaks about the prosperous women of his day as the fat cows of Bashan, which is an amazingly astute idea because it captures the fact that indeed in Bashan, in that whole area, remember that the 2.5 tribes chose to remain on the other side of the Jordan precisely because it was such rich pasture. So here were these people whose cattle were expanding, their fortunes were expanding, and in a day when prosperity was expressed in corpulence, as opposed to now when prosperous people are slim and poor people are fat, thanks to McDonald's and giant sweet beverages. In ancient times, girth was considered to be a sign of prosperity. So the women who are beginning to look like the cattle who are making them rich, you can understand why Amos would have been such a brilliant cartoonist. Anyway, we catch him at the very end of his message. The whole book is only nine chapters, and the 9th chapter, starting from the center, gives us 9 psukim that could hardly be more hard-hitting. And I'd like to survey those psukim quickly just to get an idea of the movement of his message, but then to come back around to the first several verses to look at them a little more closely, because they are based upon simile, which is not obvious in the sense of its application. Halokivne kushim atem li. It is not at all obvious, and that is reflected in the various approaches taken by the classical commentaries, even to understanding what is the basic meaning, what's the pshat of that verse. At any rate, the Ribono Shel Olam begins, or almost begins, in this Haftorah. If you think this is bad, you should see the 8 psukim that precede it. They're even more ferocious. Some of them are actually quite chilling, because he speaks about pursuing the wicked down into their tunnels, where they think they can hide. And so some of the imagery is eerily familiar. However, in the 7th verse, in the 7th verse of the 9th chapter, he is winding up the anger, and that anger will go for about 4 psukim, and it's speaking Hine ein Hashem Elokim b'mamlacha chata'ah. God has his eye, almost you can imagine a sniper. The sniper's scope has the target already in view on the sinful kingdom. Now, I'm going to come back to this particular phrase because there is a debate between the Malbim and the Ibn Ezra how to understand this verse, and that debate hinges on one of the most common hermeneutical questions, and that is an ambiguity to be explained by what came before it or by what follows it. So we'll see how that works out in a few moments. But he's still he's still fuming, and he says, "And the hani osi b'chol hagoyim es beis Yisrael. I'm going to sift out the Jewish people from among all of the Gentiles." Again, almost the visual Navi. In other words, when he creates it, the language is such that it is almost impossible not to conjure the picture. Again, the power of the cartoonist, but he does it all with words. It's very interesting how, for example, this is a side note, in the history of writing, the impact that photography, and particularly color photography, as well as certain kinds of printing techniques which allow for colors, changes advertising. So there is a point at which advertisers no longer have to describe the colors of the garments that they're trying to sell, right? So a whole subspecialty of advertising is lost because there are some, and you see sample, I can send you the samples, where the specificity of color in language, for example, robin's egg blue, is intended to do exactly what the Navi Amos does almost reflexively, and that is to create with words a picture so vivid that you feel as if you've seen a picture. So with the invention of photography and of, I forget what they call it, multichromatic printing, where you could actually show the colors, the skill and the vocabulary needed to do that in words was simply obviated because you could give them the exact picture. Anyway, so when he speaks about his sieve and v'lo yipol soror oretz, and not a single grain, and the Farshim tell you we're talking about someone who was sifting grain. The assumption is that the kernels of the desirable wheat or barley are larger than the pebbles and the sand, and the Ribbono Shel Olam's sieve will be so perfect in its discernment that not a single righteous person, as associated with the kernels of wheat, not a single righteous person will fall through, right? We have the expression fall through the cracks, that there's always the fear that when God embarks upon an enterprise of punishing the wicked, that the righteous will be swept along with it. And the Navi is giving his assurance that in this picture of the end of days, the picture of the redemption, not only will Hashem exercise his judgment, the sieve, and allow all of the detritus to fall away, not only, oh, I have to admit all these people, sorry, didn't see you. Hey, Yanish, dear. Are you in yet? I don't know, the admit button is not working. There we go. Hi, forgiveness from from Yanish and Nathan, who were joining us, and I wasn't watching the screen, I was looking at my daf. No idea where I was. The Almighty assures us that in the end of days, there will be no confusion. No righteous people will be swept away with the wicked. But by the same token, the wicked can count on being sifted out. They will be individually identified and fall to the earth. The earth, of course, always represents the inexorable force of our mortality, right? Pulling us toward the earth. I think that's why, I don't know, I can't speak for anyone else, but in me, I see aging, everything sort of falls, right? Sort of, and I interpret that as the gravity of mortality itself, announcing that it's interested in me. I am a person of interest to the Malach HaMoves, Shem Yirachim. I hope he'll let me hang out a little while longer. But, when the police come, are you under arrest? No, but you are a person of interest. Good news, this isn't. right? So anyway, so that's the chaff and the pebbles which will fall through the sieve and will be given to the earth, so to speak. Anyway, but then Hashem, when he talks about having punished, having identified the wicked kingdom, having sifted out all of the wicked, then in the final, just gorgeous 5 psukim of the book of Amos, he gives his picture of the redemption. And that's where, for example, we get the famous, the phrase which appears in the Harachaman on Sukkot, Yokim Lonu es Sukkos David Hanofoles, who will raise up the fallen structure of David, and I will, and the Godarti es Pirtsehem, and I will shore up all of the breaches, etc., and rebuild it. And he talks about the inheritance. And then on verse 13, I've given you English also on the next page if it's more comfortable. In verse 13, Hinei Yamim Ba'im Ne'um Hashem, that great phrase employed by different prophets. Good days are coming, says God. The nigash choresh b'kotzer, the planter will encounter the reaper. Again, note the concrete picture work of the Navi, that the crops will be so plentiful that you won't even finish harvesting one year when the season for planting the next. In other words, the planters will be interrupted in their work because the last season's harvesters will still be gathering in. Vishavti eshvus ami Yisrael, and I will return the captivity of my people Israel, and they will come back to the deserted cities. V'yoshavu v'notu cheromim v'shasu es yenom. Again, specific, and they will again plant vineyards and drink the wine. There was a time when the notion of an agriculture from the land of Israel was a mythological discussion. They say once that a certain Meshulach came from Eretz Yisrael, and he wanted to impress me. Someone claimed that he had the coffee of the land of Israel. Coffee of the land of Israel. The coffee of the land of Israel. What is the coffee of the land of Israel? Unfortunately, what he gave them came from his snuff box. So they took this snuff and they boiled it up, and they're drinking. They're going, it must have been as bitter as gall. And they're going, the coffee of the land of Israel. It was the idea that you can go into any half-decent wine store and find row after row after row of the wines of the land of Israel from different parts of the country, and that these wines, at least according to the Jewish link, what do I know, stand up among the fine wines of the world very respectably. And we, so half the time, if you ask somebody, go look in your closet, where are your wines from? I don't know. They could be from anywhere. They could be from Australia. They could be from California. They could be from New York. They could be from Chile. They could be from South Africa. But of course, some are from Eretz Yisrael. when this Navi speaks about V'natu Keramim V'shasu Esyenu, as this great distant hope that someday the Jewish people who have been wandering in exile will be brought home and will become again the planters of vineyards and the producers of wine, it's almost unimaginable. Ganos v'achlu es prihem, and they will make gardens and the fruits. And then the most beautiful of all, the turn of the language, unitatim al admoso, the most wonderful product, the most wonderful production, you will be planted in the land. It speaks about the Jewish people themselves as some wonderful crop that will take root in the land of Israel and experience a magical growth. And you will never again be taken off your land. Amar Hashem Elokecha. Now, so the Navi, he finishes without for a moment abandoning his signature style of the highly figurative language. You can see everything he's saying, and how that shift from the planting of orchard to planting of vineyards to the planting of human beings, that we will become that glorious rooted vine. He finishes strong. You have to say that he is till the last moment the great Amos, the keeper of sycamore trees. But let's go back for just a moment, because the Haftorah begins with a mysterious simile, which frankly to people who have been sensitized properly to issues of racism is at first, it's a little jarring and hard to figure how it's going to, what is actually meant by the Navi. Alo kivnei kushim atem li bnei Yisrael num Hashem. Are you not, or perhaps are you like the children of Cush, the Ethiopians, to me, O children of Israel? Now, remember that when you talk about Cush, there is no question that you're talking about people of color. I mean, that seems to be the main association, as the Navi, which Rashi will quote, as the leopard changing its spots and the Ethiopian, the color of his skin, that's considered a kind of a fixed characteristic. And is God comparing us to them, or is God saying, you're not like them, right? Halo kivnei, behold, because the word is ambiguous, because it could be a declaration. Halo kivnei, you're not like them, or aren't you like them? Okay, so because it says Halo es Yisrael haleis meretz Mitzrayim uflishti mikaftor va'aram mikir. Rashi here has a fascinating approach, which is pretty unique to him. Rashi says, are you any better to me intrinsically than the people of Cush? The people of Cush, remember, do have the least enviable pedigree of the Noahide family, right? Because they're associated, they're coming from Ham. There's the curse, which is associated because of their behavior with Noah, in the drunken Noah in the tent. They are, so to speak, the least prestigious. Now, on this, he's not accentuating so much racism as poor pedigree. He says, intrinsically, are you any different? What makes you different from any of the other people, particularly if you're going to insist on behaving like them? And then in the last thing, so he says, he anticipates the answer. It's a kind of an interesting rhetorical question. Are you any different? So you can tell me what makes you different. We're the people of the Exodus. You know us. We have a unique stroll with God through history. And God says, according to Rashi, big deal. I have other people that I have taken out of exile. And he refers to these cases of the Plishtim captured Kaftor and Aram from Kir, with Rashi and the Radak try to give us all of the backstory. What Rashi stresses is Yitzias Mitzrayim per se, the experience of the Exodus. It obligates the Jewish people, but it doesn't obligate God. Because you've made such a public, now this may be Moshe Rabbeinu might have seen this differently. But the idea that we have all of this history with God, and now we own him, was we can do whatever we want because God can't do anything with it because his brand is associated with our brand. The Navi questions that, says, you know what? Intrinsically, you're no better. But the next verse is what becomes interesting. Einei Hashem Elokim b'mamlacha hachata'a v'hishmadati osame al pnei ha'adam. Now, when the Malbim reads this, the Malbim says, you know what? I can wipe out any kingdom. So when he says mamlacha, it's synonymous with am. If a nation sins, they're gone. I can do that to anyone. The Ibn Ezra does it. The Ibn Ezra sees it quite differently. The Ibn Ezra understands mamlacha. Mamlacha meaning the government. What's the problem with the northern kingdom? It is the house of Jeroboam II, the corrupt king. So what the Navi then would be saying is, in the next verse, he's going to say, at the end of this verse, Efes kilo ashmed ashmid es beis Yaakov Hashem. I will not completely destroy Beis Yaakov. So for the Ibn Ezra, this remarkable idea is, for the Ibn Ezra, the idea is, I can, so to speak, surgically remove the government without losing my face in Beis Yaakov. Beis Yaakov means the Jewish people in their peoplehood. The value of the Jewish people transcends any specific government that they have at any moment. And so when the Ribono Shel Olam says, I'm going to preserve Beis Yaakov, but I'm not going to preserve the government of this particular moment, he's talking about a kind of surgery, and then it makes a very good reading in the next line when he begins to talk about the sieve, because what are people going to say? The corrupt individuals who are not part of the government. They're just regular corrupt balabatim. They're going to say, so good. I'm in Beis Yaakov. I'm Jewish. All I have to wear is the I am proud to be Jewish t-shirt, and no one can touch me. Shem says, no, that's not the way it is. The individual is still responsible. It is not only corruption at the level of government, but corruption at the level of the individual. And I have a sieve which will allow me to preserve the Jewish people by preserving the righteous, by preserving those who have been loyal, and I will still sift out the cynics. Remember that we have this image all the way going back to Sefer Devarim, about the B'nai B'nai Ya'al, the people who will say in their hearts, I'm going to sin, I'm going to do whatever I want, and I'm just going to keep it on the DL, and God will, and I'll get by. Ribono Shel Olam says, I will continue to rule the world down to the level of the individual. There is a great deal more to say about this, and it's especially from the point of view of different schools of thought on what we mean by the B'nai Kushim. Ibn Ezra says that it means the Kushim don't know who their father is. He quotes some ancient source which says that the women of Cush were promiscuous, and so no Ethiopian ever knew who his father is. And so when Hashem says, are you like that? You know who your father is, I am your father. That's a radical interpretation by the Ibn Ezra. However, the Radak says B'nai Kushim were known as the slave class. Are you any different? You have a master. You're also a slave, namely slaves to the Ribono Shel Olam. The question.
Talks about Beit Yaakov, and in text says Beit Israel. Is there some significance in the switch of the name?
Often Beit Yaakov and Beit Israel are used.
Interchangeable, but
Well, but they were also used for poetic balance. It may be that there is some allusion in Beit Israel because the northern kingdom was called Yisrael, and Amos is primarily targeting the northern kingdom. So then when he talks about Beit Israel, he's talking about their population, which is going to be subjected to.
there's no commentator that brings up that Beit Yaakov referring to women, Beit Israel referring to the men.
Well, I can only say there is no commentator that I have seen. I do not claim to have made although Shira, whenever you're ready to write, I will give you a haskama. I will write the haskama before you write your sefer. That's how much I trust you. So if you want to pursue this, gesundter hey. Let's just take one last moment to summarize. We're talking here, at least according to the reading which I'm suggesting, with some offshoots, depending on which of the Perushim, which of the commentaries you want to follow. The Navi is predicting a positive future, but he is predicting a positive future which will come about after the careful selection of people who deserve it. And that means, at least according to the Ibn Ezra, it means holding the government accountable in itself for its good or evil, and if not, they're out, but then even addressing the population and rewarding virtuous behavior, but also following iniquity down to its most individual and granular place of habitation. I think we'll pause there. How do I get out of this? Okay. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Yanis. So
Nice
good
to
hear
see
your
you.
sweet voice. Take care.
Thank you,
Nice
Rabbi.
to see you.
Thank you, Rabbi.